This boy lied about his age just to date me. Story time. So back when my cute self was a senior in high school, there was this new girl that came to our school. Long story short, me and her ended up becoming super close. I went to her house, spent the night, her family loved me. I mean, why wouldn't they? Anyways, she had a brother. We're gonna call him Binky. Me and Binky got pretty close. Now I want you guys to keep in mind, Binky didn't go to my school because their parents were divorced. So the sister who I was friends with lived with her mom, and Binky lived with his dad who lived in another city. But sometimes Binky would go to his mom's house, which is how I met him. Now that we got that out of the way, as me and Binky were getting closer, one day he asked me, "Hey, how old are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I just turned 17, how about you?" He told me, "Oh, I'm 17 too, but my 18th birthday is coming up." After a while, me and him eventually started dating. Then one day, I ran into his cousin who happened to go to my school. The rest of this story is crazy.
This is why you always say yes to tandoori chicken. In 2012, a high school tutor and her student stayed up so late one night studying that by the time they were done, the buses had stopped running. Without another way home, the student asked if he could stay the night at her place. Reluctantly, she agreed. When they got back to the apartment, she fell asleep on her bed and he fell asleep on a blanket next to her bed on the ground. A few hours later, she wakes up to the boy standing awkwardly in the middle of the room with a very strange look on his face. She asks him, "What's wrong?" He looks at her and says, "I'm really hungry. Let's go get some tandoori chicken." Confused, she says, "It's 2 a.m. Just get a snack in the cupboard." And he grabs her by the arm and he says, "No, we are getting tandoori chicken right now." And he yanks her from the bed. Feeling totally caught off guard by this whole situation, she goes into the hall with the boy, and as soon as the door shuts behind them, she can tell that he is terrified. He looks at her and just says, "I'm not actually hungry. When I woke up, there was someone under your bed."
I started dating this guy last February, and for Easter he invited me to his family's house, and I really wanted to make a good impression. He was like, "Don't worry, they'll love you. The only thing is that my mom is obsessed with her dog, so make sure you're nice to him." I'm like, of course I'm gonna be nice to her dog. I love dogs. So we get to his house, and the first thing we see is this loud yapping chihuahua running towards us. It's like missing patches of hair and has this really bad underbite, but I was like, "Oh, what a cutie." Mom's like, "Isn't he so cute? That's Peter. Who names a dog Peter?" So we go to the kitchen, and then all of a sudden, Peter starts vigorously humping my leg. His little pink wiener comes out. The mom's like, "Oh, he does that." He keeps coming back and humping it. So I go to the bathroom, and in my purse I have this little lavender perfume oil that I rub all over my legs, hoping that Peter won't like the smell of lavender. I go back out, we sit down for dinner. Peter goes under the table and starts licking my legs for the entire dinner. So finally we go home, but then his mom calls the next day, and she's crying because she had to take Peter to the vet because he was throwing up all night. I felt so bad. That dog ingested way too much lavender oil, and it's definitely my fault, but I don't say anything. Peter ended up being fine. He fully recovered. I never went back to his house because I was avoiding Peter, tiny, horny chihuahua from hell.
This girl literally lived a nightmare. A 17-year-old girl was watching TV late at night when her motion detector lights in her driveway suddenly went on. She assumed it was just an animal, so she got up, drew the blinds, and went back to watching TV. Then a little bit later, it happened again. Before she could even react, she looks over and clearly makes out a silhouette of a person right behind the blinds who starts banging aggressively on the window. The girl stands up and goes, "I'm gonna call the cops!" And the figure stops for just a second, sprints to the side door and starts pounding even louder on that, screaming incoherently. The girl runs to the bathroom, barricades herself inside while she waits for the police, and then her worst nightmares come true. She hears glass shatter in the other room. After a few minutes of silence, she opens her door just a crack to get a peek outside, and standing in her living room next to a broken window is some crazy old woman who looks over at her and starts sprinting toward her. The lady comes smashing into the door and starts wailing on it until the police arrive and take her away. She was a lunatic who had escaped her facility.
Now that I got a taste, I think that I'd suffocate for every second that you are by my side. But now I'm stuck at the gate, a Lucifer's estate. I fell in love with a girl I met in hell, thinking about all the things where you pull my strings. I love the way you turn me on. I ain't Hades, but I'm the king. I'd do anything so that I could take you home. She drove me crazy, yeah. She drove me crazy, yeah. She drove me.
¿Me acabo de hacer un maquillaje innecesario? Sí. ¿Se va a quedar mi cara manchada por varios días? Probablemente. ¿Mi video va a tener la atención que este trabajo merece? No.
Shawty gon' get that paper. Shawty tongue rip like razor. Shawty got wit, got flavor. Part of my tits and makeup.
This is why you should never stay in sketchy motels. In 2005, a young woman on a solo road trip across the country decided to stop for the night. The first place she sees is the Mountaintop Motel. It looked pretty cheap, but she was tired, so she said good enough. The check-in guy eyed her up and down very uncomfortably and then asked her if she was traveling alone. She ignores the question, pays for her room, and then walks away with the key. When she gets inside her room and sees there are literally cockroaches in her bed, she says nope and decides to sleep in her car in the parking lot. Around 3 a.m., she wakes up to see the check-in guy using his own keys to get into the motel room she was supposed to be in. A few minutes later, he storms out and slams the door and starts walking towards her car. Terrified, she hides under her blanket as the man tries to open her car doors but can't and walks away. She speeds off and calls her friend and asks her to look up the address of Mountaintop Motel so she can give it to police. Her friend's quiet for a second and then just says, "The Mountaintop Motel closed a week ago."
Water, earth, fire, air.
Never thought of it, and I know this much is true. Baby, you have become my addiction. Seem to change. The more they stay the same, don't you hesitate, girl. Put your records on, tell me your favorite song. They stay the same, don't you hesitate, girl, put your records on, tell me your favorite song, yeah, go ahead, let your head down. Hey, Bobby.
Hi, Cam.
You wanna go for a ride?
Sure, Cam.
Jump in.
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world. That is plastic. It's fantastic. You can brush my hair, undress me everywhere. Imagination, that is your creation.
Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
I'm living in my own world. I am plastic, call me classic. You can't touch me there, you can't touch my body unless I say so. Ain't your Bobby no?
She got me going psycho. She got me going down.
This is me, taking off a look that took 3 hours. I've only had it on for 5 minutes. But I'm really not looking to break out. I'm really hoping I at least got my 15 minutes of fame from this because my face is probably going to be stained for weeks. Thank you for coming to my TED.